This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is sponsored by MagnaGrip, America's choice for clean air. Eliminate 100% of airborne toxins from within the station with MagnaGrip. Learn more at magnagrip.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Better Every Shift podcast. My name is Aaron Zamzow. I'll be your host. I'll guide you on this journey, a biohacking journey today, which I know has the editor-in-chief, I like to call her the commander, Janelle Fosquet, a little excited. Janelle, how are we?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. You keep giving me these wonderful guests that talk about a lot of topics that are near and dear to my heart, but I think they are to most of firefighters and first responders, as they should be. Today, we got Assistant Chief Mike Binney here from West Metro Fire Rescue in Colorado. Chief, welcome to the program, by the way. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is going to be fun.
Well, we've met a couple of times talking about health and wellness, and we've heard the word biohacking, and we're going to throw some other words out there that I think our listeners should take note of. But first and foremost, you got your master's degree in emergency management and policy, and then let's go get another one in health informatics. And
it sounds fake. I promise it's a real thing.
It does kind of sound a little made up, but it's from the Yale School of Public Health, so it's got to be good. You also then served as a teaching fellow there for the Department of Bioethics. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about biohacking, but mainly about firefighter health, wellness, and really self-improvement, right? Because all this stuff comes together to fit the theme of the show, being a little bit better every single day, every shift, and making those around you a little bit better. But first and foremost, what the hell is informatics, health informatics?
Ooh, yeah, that's the million-dollar question. I went to school for a long time, and I'm still not really sure what it is. I think it's, the art of using data science and then adding in biodata from that angle to actually try and make some sort of salient point or understanding of a situation using information that had previously not been available. So healthcare informatics, bio, whatever you want to call it. I just think it's cool.
Yeah, it's really been a topic, I think, coming to light in the fire service, because now more than ever, we're getting a lot of research, a lot more data than we ever have been. You've been in the fire service for quite a long time. We talked a little bit, almost 20 years. Is that right? I can't remember.
Close, if you count my amazing time on the wheelchair car right after school.
Oh, heck yeah.
After college.
Yep.
I mean, those are years of service. They make you appreciate when you're not on the wheelchair car. It keeps you humble to have that as your launch pad into emergency services. So yeah.
Yeah, but remember back in the day, 20 years ago, we weren't talking anything about data. We weren't talking about any of this stuff. And I remember I've been presenting on health and wellness for over 15 years. And I was like the first person in the room, when you go in the green room with all the speakers, and, they put me in the way corner, way back, in the hallway after lunch, of course. But now you go to a lot of conferences, Science to the Stations we met at. There's also almost every firefighter conference has something about, health and wellness. So how are you surprised at how that data has really, and is that really what kind of got you to think about pursuing those degrees?
Kind of. So, but I do think from the wellness perspective, we always knew what we knew. We knew people were busy. We knew people were tired. We knew that as call load went up, this was unsustainable. But to actually create metrics that could tell us how bad or why so bad, I think really allowed us the opportunity to have kind of a shift from just kind of like a feeling or like seeing people tired or, not remembering driving home from work and things like that. Now we can quantify it. And I think that gives us the leverage to actually do something about it and inform policy, and then actually make changes that are measurable to say what we're doing actually has value. And then when we look back on fewer people having those issues or feeling that way or thinking, then we know what we've done, or our mission has been at least successful or in the progress towards doing better by our people. So yeah, yep. But did that make me go to school for it? The informatics part, yes. So we kind of had this crazy idea, myself and our risk management chief, his daughter is a very competitive cyclist, and they had been using biometrics to look at workload training and tapering and measuring their sleep and tying that in. And I think of us in some way, shape, or form like tactical athletes, from the regard of that we need to be ready to roll when the red light goes off. And are we ready to roll at every season of our lives? Are you as ready to do your job when you're 25 as when you're 55? Well, you assume that you've kind of accumulated knowledge and experience, but our bodies don't do this over the long haul. And so being able to measure that and be able to leverage that, I think was the only logical step. So we thought about, applying to the program. I needed to have a project, and because the way that it was grant funded, we needed to line everything up way ahead of time. So we had enough runway to do this while we were still under the umbrella of the School of Public Health. So we could go through the IRB process. We could go through everything we needed to do. We could meet the grant window. And we needed to have enough time to collect enough information to be able to know what we were measuring was real or not. Yeah. So truthfully, that was what we wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do when I signed up for the program.
What was the biggest discovery, like the most eye-opening thing you kind of were able to put data to?
Yeah, I think we knew we were tired, but we didn't know how much. When you look at a lot of the risk management or the way that we measure how busy people are, when we use unit hour utilization as kind of the gold standard right now, when you look at like the accreditation process or when you're doing your metrics, when we tested UHU versus people's actual biodata, we found that that UHU was only correct about 27% of the time. If you were to bin everybody into, red, yellow, or green, ready to go, kind of ready to go, or not ready to go. If we strictly use UHU as a metric, we're missing the boat most of the time. So that was probably the most eye-opening, is like you're told UHU is the gold standard and it's great at measuring how busy machines are. But we learned that.
What about the people behind them?
Yeah, right? we don't know what we're doing to the people. So that I think was the most important thing that came out of the project. And truthfully, now we have a great baseline data set, so that if we make changes or we're looking at different things, like, can we quantify those things and actually take it back to our firefighters and say, yeah, like this actually helped people, and then everybody can high five and we can move on to the next thing.
Well, hold on. You got to share that. You got to come back on the program when you find these things, because we got to get that out to the rest of the fire service. What's the best metric to use then, if it's not unit utilization? Yeah.
So we created our own kind of learned algorithm where we weighted each one of the different biomarkers we could measure, weighted it differently, and then also took in our operational time. So we looked at how many calls do you run in the 24 hours? How many calls do you run at night between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.? And then how many minutes are you committed to calls as well? So like when you're actually assigned to a call, because on an ambulance, you're going to run a lot of calls. Your time window is going to be narrower because you're just going to be turning and burning. Whereas if you're on an engine or you're on a truck and you're on calls for longer at night, to just weight it specifically to your responses within that time window and not your minutes. So we created a model for an ambulance, a model for an engine, and a model for a truck, and then a model for an overhead unit, like a chief or a safety officer. And we were able to predict what somebody's, in essence, our own recovery score based on the machine learning algorithms we created and trained on our all the information that we collected during the biometric program. And some models are better than others. Our medic one, we had so many people putting into it. It's 96% accurate within a couple points of what we were able to measure. And then we had fewer people putting into some of the other roles. So we're less sure of those, but then we compared them. We binned everybody into red, green, or yellow, and then compared it to what our UHU thresholds were from our accreditation process. And we saw we were missing the mark. And so now we can use that information to say, if we make these operational changes, or if we move things around, we can then measure it again and say, we can demonstrate our improvement based on an algorithm that we built off of our own people.
And your own
which
data.
is
And typically,
exactly
right? It's using the same kind of data grouping too. Like it's not a fresh data set or data group. What were you using for like biometric from the biological marker standpoint? Were you using like body temperature? Were you using resting heart rate, HRV?
Yeah, we had all of it. We have heart rate variability. We had resting heart rate. We had pulse ox. We had one interesting thing we learned was your skin temp. The busier you are, the higher your average skin temp is for the day. So that goes back into a lot of the science of your body actually needs to cool down to go into some of the restorative sleep stages. Yep. And it was statistically significant that people who were on busier rigs had higher skin temps through that day, which is crazy that we were able to like, oh, this, of course it is. But, then there's all these other questions of like, well, if you're wearing bunker gear, of course you're going to be warmer, or if you're going to be out doing running calls. So there's a lot more to dig into, but it was just interesting. And, we should absolutely look into it more because we know how important it is to have that core temperature cool off, when you can at night to get that restoration that you need. So that was interesting. We have, I know all the sleep stages that you can measure through a wearable is, it's a toss up. It's good because then we can anchor it off of our own data set and compare self to self. And then we can also look at population level and what are our trends. Like if we're using the same device and it's pretty good at measuring those different stages, then we can say like, well, we can have a pretty good idea of what we're doing. We'll improve that. One thing that was really interesting to me is like just looking at sleep opportunity. Like, do we have policy or structural issues within the way that we do fire department stuff that is making it more difficult for people to even have the opportunity to sleep? And that's, one thing that kind of aligns with the larger conversation that Sarah and Joel are working on, and the whole NDRI crew is like, why do we start when we start? Like our 7 a.m. shift change time, we've just done that forever. Part of it is because people had other jobs. Part of that is because people have kids. Part of it is because I like driving to work when no one else drives to work. And if you're going to be there a while, you might as well, just get it over with and get to work. Well, now we're learning that systems like that are actually creating part of the problem we're trying to fix. Like we were able to measure with this project what people's biological like wake up time was for hundreds of people, thousands of data points. And we were able to see like their bodies want to wake up at around 6:45, broadly speaking, and they want to go to bed between 10:30 and 10:45 whether they're at work or not. And our system is artificially waking people up early. 2 hours early on either end of your shift, whether it's to wake up early to drive to work or wake up early to come, to wash the truck and go home. Yeah. So our system is impacting people's sleep opportunity. And we put it in a cute little graph and showed it to everybody. And they're like, oh my God, why are we doing this?
Right. But still people with that are like, why are we doing this? Here's this graph. But of course the fire service, well, I don't know. 7 a.m. was always their start time. Stop talking about changing stuff now. Right. Yeah. Like, and you and I have been in the room where the researchers look at us and go, are you all dumb? Like, what is going on?
The answer is
like,
yes.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. Yes. And we're good with that.
We're like, okay. Yep. And then you go out and you talk to someone, you go, hey, we should really consider changing this to like 11 or 10. Well, hold on here. But I'm like, well, don't you want to spend a little more time with your kids? Yeah. Don't you want better sleep? Yeah. Well, this makes sense then, doesn't it? No. Right? Yeah. Okay. I can't reason with that. What type of I know that our listeners are like, well, what wearables are you talking about? Is it same as like a Fitbit or a Whoop, or, is there one better than the other that you guys found?
So we went with the Whoop. They've been great to work with. Super cool because they also have an integrated wellness platform. And part of that comes into later. I want to talk about like, who are we actually helping? Because I think that's like a really important aspect. We went with the Whoop for a couple reasons. Number one, they allowed us to export all the raw biodata. And they have a fair bit of the information that's in there that's algorithmic, that is proprietary to them. And now we're basing it on an algorithm that we don't know how it's concocted, like that's fine for a commercial user. But if we're actually trying to measure things, I want to know, like, what are we actually measuring? So they were cool enough, and part of their platform is making that raw data available so that when we synthesize it with our call data and our staffing data, like I said, we actually know what we're measuring. So we went with the Whoop. Our system is agnostic to whatever kind of, it doesn't matter what device you would have. The system can process the same thing as long as we can get the biodata out in raw format. We went with the Whoop again because I believe in the idea of using the wearable not just for science, but also as a wellness tool. So Whoop allowed us to blind everybody for a calibration period. So we blinded everybody for almost 40 days where they were just wearing it. They'd get a little notification when it was time to charge it, and they didn't know anything. So we didn't want somebody using that feedback to change their behavior, because we're trying to measure what is your, what are you doing in the wild? So then we unblinded everybody and then actually made it available to everyone as like a wellness device that they could use to track their workouts, track, all the different habits. One cool thing that they have on there is like the journal. So you can be like, oh, what are you doing? Your strain score.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we allowed people to use that tool and then collected some feedback on it on the other end. Also during that process, and I think people wanted to kill me, but we also used Joel's emergency services sleep diary, and the text would go out 3 times a day while you were at work. And I'm surprised I didn't get locked in a dumpster for that. But we wanted to look at it from a perspective of, can we also collect qualitative data, like what's your perception of how you feel, and does that align with what your body is actually telling you? Because everybody knows, like, you can have a really busy set and you're like, no, I'm good to go, and your mind might be telling you something that your body is not. So we wanted to add that kind of extra layer in there as well. So all of these systems came together, and then we were able to see, like, what are you doing with this, and like how can we create an actual, like, number-based representation of what a human goes through during a 48-hour tour.
Yeah.
So
During that time, were they able to see the disconnect between how they felt and what the data was showing them in real time?
no, we did. We talked about it in kind of our paper that we put together at the end, where we let everybody know, like, the busier you were, you knew you were tired, you knew you were stressed. One thing that was at least interesting to me is that people's perception of their anxiety, like, because we asked some of the kind of the mental stress question on that second morning, was kind of a mismatch. I think it was lower than what I would have imagined would have been. I think you numb yourself in some regards, like on those second days, because perhaps, I don't know, maybe like your cognitive decision making, like, is your autonomic nervous system is a little bit off. Like, we were able to measure that your heart rate variability is lower on your second day, and specifically on the really busy ambulances, your body was going into protective mode on those second days. And I would imagine that a lot of that, those kind of sensory inputs are dulled, and we're kind of able to capture that in regard to looking at the correlation between your heart rate variability and your perception of your anxiety or your stress that you experienced during your first 24 hours, which is crazy, like, to even think that that's a thing we could measure.
Yeah. You guys do a 4896?
Yeah, we are in the
Okay.
4896. Yep.
And I think it's one of the lies that we tell ourselves, that firefighters and medics, like first responders, I think we learn to live at like 75 to 85%. Would you, and is the data, was your data kind of telling you that as well?
Well, to try and tie it to a percent number, I don't know. Like, I think I'm too close to the numbers to make a call on that.
Or live in the yellow almost, right?
Yeah,
we live in the yellow,
no.
thinking that we're green almost.
I would, yeah, I think there's absolutely truth to that. Like, a normal person would not be like, oh yeah, you mean, of course you're going to work another day. Why wouldn't you? Like, of course you're, and we see it. You see, like, kind of this group think of, like, people are like, no, I want to be on the busy ambulance. As long as I'm with my friend, I can do anything. Or as long as I'm with my normal group or my crew, like, put us into the meat grinder. We'll be fine. We get through everything together. We always do. And there's truth to that. And, now we have kind of, like I said, we have the the data to kind of leverage that and provide that information back. But even more so from like a predictive standpoint or a proactive standpoint, we can build policies, we can build our deployment model in knowing where these places are where this kind of stuff happens, and we can reverse engineer it out. And that's, I think, another tool that we'll have moving forward is to look at accident data or medical error data and find out the conditions in which those things occur, and then say, all right, well, if we can cut down half of those by doing this, this, and this, why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it's going.
We talked about biohacking. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Is what are some of these maybe small, usable, tangible things that we can do? Is that when, that's kind of my idea of biohacking, but really help me define it.
Well, I was thinking about that earlier, and I think there are kind of two different paths of biohacking. I think there's biohacking from the sense of using different supplements or things like that, where you're actually changing the physiology. I think in my world, my idea of biohacking is to use validated data to build policy that, like I said, that reduces the likelihood of bad things happening, or getting ahead of things so we can be proactive, but having it based on your own people's information. Like if we were to do this, when we were doing our pilot study, we took, I think it was like 12 or 14 people we put the whoops on, and half of them were in admin roles and half of them were in operational roles. And we saw that every single domain that we could measure, people were statistically different. The two groups were completely different humans. So to think that we could apply best practices from different jobs or different types of people or different people with different things going on in their lives, I think that would be disingenuous to like the overall goal of what I think doing things like this is capable of. Like we're able to train our data set or our models on our own people, and then have that information guide policy. Like I think that's, in my mind, that's where the future goes. Like we can have mathematical precision, for a lack of a better term, of like exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And then we can, like I said, we can find ways to make it so that the conditions under which bad stuff happens, they don't exist. Not that they won't happen, but we can, scrub out the opportunity for a lot of that stuff to happen. Yeah. And I think a lot of it, number one, at a population level or at a department level, we can collect that information, know what our middle group is, and build towards that. But at the individual level, each person that uses that information to go to bed earlier, or the person who says, you know what, I'm going to shut it down after 3 beers at the Broncos game. Like you have that information that you can make better choices with, or different choices, and rank those things and make those tangible things that you can then later measure, and then say, you know what, that worked out great for me. That's why I'm going to do this from now on, and make those tiny little nudge changes, rather than saying, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and you're not allowed to do this. Like that doesn't do anybody any good. So I think that's where the power of, this kind of information comes and has potential for the future.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes in a snap. Visit magnagrip.com to download MagnaGrip's free grant guide, with expert tips to solidify a grant for essential safety equipment, such as MagnaGrip's exhaust removal systems. That's magnagrip.com to download the free guide.
So going beyond the individual level, if you go back to the example about the sleep times, like where can you begin to implement that? Is that like you can start at like an individual department level and say, hey, shift's going to start at 10 a.m. now? And like, how do you even begin to test that?
So we are lucky enough, we got re-upped for funding for another year. Shout out to the Colorado eHealth Innovation Fund. They funded us the first round. So we're, and then, another big part of this is working with our organized labor group, working with our union. When we can talk about data privacy later, our union, our members are the ones who actually own the biodata. And that I think is key when you talk about like, how do you create meaningful change? So our membership is actually voting beginning of October on whether or not we want to change to an 8 a.m. or a 9 a.m. next year. And we went through this whole process of looking at how each division would be impacted if we went any later, how the training schedule, we do a lot of collaborative academies and trainings and things. So my vision would be, down the road, we can create this and say, hey, we actually measured what benefit or not benefit. I mean, from a scientific standpoint, we have to look at it that maybe this does nothing. I wouldn't think that, but I guess we'll actually be able to measure it to find out. So if we change something, we'll be able to actually measure it throughout the course of next year, and then kind of put, our marker in our data set, and then measure our own pre and post with the exact same people. And we're going to have, 2.5, almost 3 years of continuous biodata from our people, which is absolutely wild to think, the questions we haven't even thought of yet that we could potentially investigate and actually find, a relationship between things. So that's our next step. And then if we can measure it scientifically, if we can do a really clean job of doing it, then we can make this recommendation and actually show and demonstrate, potentially a benefit. And I think that goes to, any kind of intervention. I look at what Palm Beach County is doing, and they're working with Harvard Sleep Med. And they're going to measure their transition from the 2448 to the 2472 using a very similar platform to us. And like, man, when you talk about like creating validated ways of demonstrating what works and what works better, I think this is, a prime example of doing that. Like, we all know, like, if you're at work for fewer hours, you're probably going to be, you're probably going to do something more dumb with your time off anyway.
Well,
like
it depends, right?
But,
yeah. Hopefully, we're thinking that you'd be more productive and more
self-reflective.
health-conscious. Yeah, self-reflective, but maybe not. I mean, I think it also depends on the stage of the individual and maybe the state of the individual, and which kind of leads to like, do you have data behind burnout? Can you sense, and can we actually put some data to like someone saying, man, I'm burned out, and could you look at like we can actually measure that?
Well, because of the way that we built our consent platform, we don't look down to the individual level. Okay. What we can do potentially is we can aggregate all of the people who have been assigned to a very busy ambulance and see how many total days that group of people were assigned to that ambulance over what now will be a year and a half. And we can say, did those things change? And then if we do make an operational change, say, oh, we're going to, move a tower to this station, so then you're only doing 1 in 5 seats is actually the attending paramedic, and you've got 2 sets on the tower, 1 set on an engine, 1 set driving the bus, and then 1 set attending or whatever. And we can track that cohort as those operational things change. In theory, we'd be able to quantify, maybe an improvement if you're not in the hot seat as the attending medic every set, and look at it over the long haul. So to track burnout, not down to the individual layer because of the way that we're set up, but I will say, because we offer the unblinded version, like the commercial version of the Whoop that is a wellness app, people will get that information. Whoop does a really good job of doing like a monthly performance assessment where they send you all these fancy charts and graphs of all of your biometrics for the month. And I had one guy reach out to me and he was like, is there any way we could get these in aggregate and actually take them to my doctor? And I was like, well, I guess so. So like there is, and this goes back to like, when you use these projects, like who are you actually helping? Like we were able to measure that. I divided everybody up into kind of their baseline sleep aptitude. Like, were they good sleepers? Were they shitty sleepers? Were they kind of middle of the road? And then I ran like all of our analytics across those different quartiles. And I found that the top 50% of sleepers using the Whoop and providing, or any biometric and providing that information back to them, did not really make a measurable difference for them because they are already pretty good sleepers. Like, and I haven't looked into like the performance data, like if they used it as a VO2 max improvement tool or use their heart rate, like I'm sure that there's value there. But the people we helped the most were the bottom quartile of sleepers. The shittiest sleepers we have showed double-digit improvements in sleep opportunity, and then all of the different, restorative measures that we were able to actually use. So the people you want to help the most, like using a system like this helps those people. Like we now have a year and a half of information to prove
Yeah.
that that's the case.
Yeah. And I think some of that too comes with personal education, right?
Mhm.
People becoming more invested in, and when you talk to firefighters, like, you always ask, like, how are you feeling? And if you really dig into that, how are you feeling? Like, how do you feel mentally? How do you feel physically? Are your joints achy? Like right? Which most of us say yes, but a lot of that can be dependent upon hydration, foods you ate,
Mhm.
right? Restorative sleep or not. So like is there any part of this plan to then say, all right, we're going to use this for better education
Mhm.
overall, like to your own members, but also hopefully then transfer back through the podcast to the entire, nation here of misfits that we like to call
Yes.
ourselves.
No, I do. And part of that comes into trying to leverage at the individual level these things as wellness tools. So we did an exit survey to say, should the department continue to invest in this, whether or not eHealth picks us up for another round. And it was like 94% of people said that the information that they got was valuable to them.
Oh, wow.
And, when you talk about kind of the gray area of what are we actually measuring when you're trying to slice and dice sleep data, one thing that is irrefutable that we were able to measure is those who stuck with the program over the long haul. Like after we did our blinded part and after we did like 6 weeks of measuring on the other end, we basically said, go wild, use it for whatever you want. If you want to just, put it in a drawer and never look at it again, that's cool too. The people who were able to stick with the program and are still using the information, they were the ones at that initial offset, because you kind of have like a novelty curve where everybody's like, oh, this is cool, I'm going to do it. And then at about 3 months, we lost about half the people who were in the study. The people who stuck with it, we were able to measure that they stayed in bed, whether they went to bed earlier or they woke up later, about 42 minutes longer than during their blinded phase. And that takes conscious effort, right? Like that's like, all right, I'm not going to watch, one more episode of something on Netflix or something. I'm going to shut it down and we're going to go to sleep at, 9:45 instead of 10:45. So that takes conscious effort, and that's something we were able to measure. And that happened at work and at home. So again, when you talk about like personal choice and actually using the information and then making measurable changes in your own life, that's one thing that we, Dead to Rights measured, is that if you were willing to make those changes and use the information to help guide your behaviors, you were doing better. And we could measure it, which is cool.
What are 3 things that you would recommend for our listeners to really make make a marketable improvement in health and wellness?
All right. Number 1 for sure would be, when you're tired, it's time to shut it down. And I know we all do it. Like you're at work and you're like, all right, let's, we can just watch, one more episode with the crew. And there's a real window when you need to go to bed, and you need to go to bed earlier than we're currently doing it. And part of that is our culture. Like there's nothing better than staying up way too late, playing Nintendo 64 at the station or whatever.
Sitting at the table, just talking about life for whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
And part of that is also important to the culture, the overall health of a crew. I would just suggest maybe we start about an hour earlier. That would be one thing. Go to bed earlier. Number 2, I would say try and gamify your own wellness work. And whether that be using an app, using the badges, like as corny as some of it is, like it genuinely works. Like I think about during COVID, like we got a Peloton because my wife's a high school teacher and she was teaching from home, and I was in the office for part of it. And then I was back online, and like having a Peloton where you're like trying to keep your weekly streak alive, like that's a real thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, fine, I'm just going to do a 5-minute stretching so I don't lose my streak or whatever. So I think like gamifying your behaviors works for us as humans. So I would say those are kind of the 2 big things. And then also like diet matters so much more than and I'm in a real weird season of life because, we've got little kids. So we do mini corn dogs, and like, I'm like, all right, I'm eating the rest of that Uncrustable because I'm cheap. And so there's like stuff that we do every day that we could probably do better, and being more cognizant of what we put into our bodies is super important. And I think that's, between that and just trying to move in some regard every day. I think those were the things that I have personally been able to measure that have improved my ability to get good sleep.
Yeah.
Granted, having little kids who are waking up because they're scared at night, or we're now back in school, so we're on our like fourth cold, like having a 4-year-old come and just like cough directly into your eyes at like 4:30 in the morning. Those are things that you can't help, other than if you turn the locks backwards on their doors, which that's probably not a good idea either.
Yeah.
But
As a fire community,
yeah,
I think we
yeah,
don't advise that.
I'm very much anti that. But those are the things that you can do. The things you can control, they matter, and we can measure it. And I've seen in my own life how much those things matter if you commit to it.
Yeah.
But like in anything in life, if you just do it half-assed, you're going to get half-assed results.
Yeah. And I think that's where Gamify helps a little bit. Cause like I've mentioned numerous times Duolingo, that damn bird just keeps popping up. And now, like, I don't know if you notice, like in Duolingo, if you haven't done it that day, he glares at you with this, this
very
this look of
disappointed
disappointment. Yeah. But I do think too, like the apps, you have to look at them and embrace them with, hey, this is a challenge. And I think too, like if we can embrace that challenge to those around us, right? Like, hey, the steps thing. My mom she is totally committed to 10,000 steps a day. And she will text me, I got 2,600 or whatever, or not 26, like 13,000, like getting other people around you, getting support really makes a difference. And you had mentioned too, that the union is really been supportive of this. Do you think that's one of the reasons why the program has been so successful, is just that, right? Everyone says we know we're going to go all in. And then now that it's like the ball is rolling, it's like it continually draws more attention and I think more positive attention.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is you get the buy-in when you're doing it for the right reasons, when you're leading with intentionality and genuine interest in trying to make an improvement for our people. That's how you rally around. Like you have to use a ton of political capital to get something off the ground. And part of that is creating partnerships, within our organized labor, our union. They have been great because they're, like I said, they're the owners of the biodata. The way that we structured our system was that the biodata is owned by our people. Our e-board is the one who signs off when somebody wants to use our data set. They have to sign a data use agreement with our e-board. And within that document is, are you using this information to improve health and wellness of firefighters? Because this information, one of the things that we learned is like, it can be used for good as well as evil.
Yeah.
And to have our membership as the gatekeepers for our own biodata means it's not me, it's not our fire chief, it's not our admin wing, it's not an insurance company, it's not a lawyer who's going to try and, get at it after, somebody wads up an ambulance or something. Like it is truly ours, that's owned for us, with the intent of improving health and wellness. And I think that helps you with buy-in. It helps you with credibility when you have a policy change or a deployment shift or something you're doing. You can say, look, like this is us, like this is to improve us and how we do business to take care of our people. We trained the model on you.
Yeah.
And so I think that gets buy-in, which is super important.
Right. Cause you don't want this stuff to come back and go, oh, well, they were a red. They should have never really been driving that ambulance. And now they get an accident. And all of a sudden there goes so much to stay there. The trust is out the door. And obviously, having the union and the members have that power, I think is good, which says, I think the right thing about what your administration is doing is like, look, this isn't not about us holding this against you. It's about us trying to figure out how we can help each other. And so that I wanted to emphasize that, because that's a highlight of the program. I think a lot of departments and unions really need to start coming together, because it's really, it's a matter of public health and public and community health. We're both battling the same things here. We talk about burnout, and there's some programs that you've been invested in too, like a mobile integrated health. You need the unions buy in on that stuff too. Talk a little bit about how a program that you have a little bit of passion in, and how you think that can also help us with our burnout and with our call volumes.
Yeah, so we use nurse practitioners and PAs and then community paramedics in our model. And so we have like a sprinter van, and their job is they go around and snipe calls, low acuity calls. They can do stitches. They can, do IV antibiotics. They can do all the things that need to get done that otherwise someone would have to go to the urgent care for. They also do a ton of resource nav and meet with our higher utilizers and work with some of our community partners to try and connect people with the resources that they need. Like, how often have we been on an ambulance and been like, well, it's it's 4 PM, like we can take you to the emergency room, or we can like leave you here and you can figure it out on your own. And our medics are we're between a rock and a hard place. They're like, well, you don't need to go to the emergency room. We know how expensive this is for you. We know that, one of the highest stresses on people personal finance wise is medical debt. Like, we need another option. And so our chief was, super passionate about this and wanted to find a way to integrate this model into what we were doing. And then it's just kind of organically grown into, we have our higher utilizers that we meet with, and, our nurse practitioner will call and say, hey, what are you doing with your pills? You good? Like, and check in, and whether it's doing fall reduction or in-home senior assessment, like, and they do those connections with the resources that the paramedics either don't have time for because they're there for an acute medical condition, or they don't have the skill set for. Like, when you're on a busy ambulance, the last thing you want to do is like, oh, do you have, can we help you put up some fall protection or some rails in here? Like, you want to be in and out. And by doing that preventative work, we're able to get ahead so that the call that doesn't happen, we're not waking people up for. And to add some numbers to it, we were able to measure pre and post. And once we had one of our nurse practitioners or PA engage with somebody who had, I think it was like they had called 6 times in a month or something, we created that flag in our reporting software, and they went out and they met with them. And once we met with somebody, over the next 60 days, their calls for service went down almost 80%. So like, those calls that never happen and that's where I think, like, tying into like the 911 system being relatively reactive, like, how do we create a robust community risk reduction team that's actually out there working ahead of the crews to help, stop those calls from even happening? And, another prime example is one of our EMS captains, my buddy Brian. He is his mission is to meet with nursing home ownership and things like that. We can actually provide their data back to them and say, like, these are the calls that we're coming out on that we, 92% of the time, we never transport this call type. Like, how can we work together so that this call doesn't happen? And can we get ahead of it by you guys having in-home rounds, or, things that you're doing so that we don't have to be here on a call that we'd never take anybody to the hospital for anyway. So that increases reliability of the units. When you talk about burnout, like, you don't get burned out from running fires and doing awesome stuff. You get burned out from seeing the same person 3 times in 2 days who has the exact same problem, and they're just accumulating wristbands from the hospital.
Yeah.
Like, that's where
different hospitals too. You got 3 different colors going on, and you feel like you don't make an impact, right?
Exactly.
You just feel like you're a babysitter at that point. And there are shifts that those take more out of you than, running 8 to 10 to 15 legitimate. We really help people today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right. There's that.
And those are the ones that make doing this job amazing and separates what we do from so many other jobs on this planet. And so if we can maximize coolness and take care of those other things, before they even occur, then we talk about burnout, we talk about sleep, we talk about, all the wellness aspects. Like, I think there are so many different kind of pillars of what wellness means. And I think that those are ones that we're just starting to see the value in, and, we're starting to measure the value in.
Yeah. Using data for good, understanding how to use data for good. Last question, buddy. Like, where do you want to see this go? Like, what, if we talk a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, you're ecstatic because this is going on. Like, where are we?
I would love to see, I want to do a plug for Sarah and Joel's study, the NDRI group. If you haven't seen it on any of the social media platforms, that first survey that they're doing is collecting a lot of the baseline data. And as that project and that grant spools up, they are looking for fire departments with unique deployment models or considering changes to reach out to them, because the best thing we can do is measure the weirdos or the people who think differently on how we do this job, so that we can understand through a similar protocol or a similar way we measure everybody, to see what works and what works maybe better. And so I would recommend to everybody who hasn't to take that survey, because that's critical. And if you work at a weirdo department or you work somewhere where you're change curious, I would reach out to Sarah's group, to the people at NDRI, and see if there's a good partnership to, doing some of this biometric work, because, I'm just some weirdo in Colorado, and, we're doing what I think is cool here, but the real power of it is to see how, we're lucky in Colorado. Our fire departments do very well. And a lot of it is because and not that we don't face trouble, same as everywhere, financially, but there are places in this country where you can't make a decent living doing this job. And so if we can leverage this kind of system or this kind of information to help people, through the collective bargaining process, or through, by creating these platforms and this information to help people improve the overall conditions under which they do the exact same job, then that's where I think we really start to move the needle on overall wellness. Because, some suburban fire department in Colorado can squeak out an extra 15% of sleep for their people. That's great. But what are we doing for the people who are in the stations that are 100 years old, that don't have, that are in trucks that are 40 years old, or, they have the stations that have the black soot on the walls, and the treadmills right by the exhaust pipe.
Still have the smoke rings from when you could smoke in the firehouses, right? Yeah.
So I think that's where, like, if we can leverage kind of our privilege as a suburban fire department in Colorado to help other people have the horsepower they need to make their situations better, like, that's what we're here for. And that's why I think what the work that Sarah's doing, the work that the guys down, like I said, in Palm Beach County that they're doing, and then the guys at George Mason are looking at load management strategies in academies. Like, how can we use this type of platform to help people who are transitioning from regular jobs into shift work, like, be more in tune with their bodies, so they're not like, oh, it's the second day and I'm the new person, so I need to wake up at 4:30 to start coffee for people who aren't going to drink it, and then they're on their like fifth energy drink by noon.
Yeah.
Like, how do we change the culture of that by giving people the information to be more in tune with their own bodies while they're switching,
and give them permission to do that? Too, right? Culturally, to give people the permission. I think also to give the permission to take a needed nap, and to understand kind of what's going on mentally, physically with our own, bodies, right? Like, I think that's kind of the cool part about it. And you and we're misfits, not only because we believe in continually getting better, but we also like, you're your own experiment. You got your Whoop, you have all these different things to try, right? And we kind of bonded together at Science to the Stations, which is going to be in Colorado in November. We did interview Sarah. We'll have a link to that survey, the sleep survey, but also come and see us. You'll be presenting at Science Stations, I think, as I will be there every day talking about different things. But it's a way to find what did you say? Your own pack of nerds.
Yes. Yep. There are a lot of cool people out there. And if you don't feel like you fit in at your fire department because of you're asking these questions, this is the perfect place to find people who ask similar questions.
Right.
You're not worried about getting locked in a locker. Or
right.
Trash can or something.
You're not going to get any evil looks. You're going to get smiles and people going, I thought that same thing. So, well, and I look forward to seeing you there, my friend. And thank you so much just for all the insights. And we could talk for hours, and we're going to continue this at Science to the Stations. And hopefully a lot of the misfits from the Better Every Shift kind of nation here will be there to say hi to you. And, I love what you're doing there, and please keep us abreast at all the different things you're learning, because using data to get better, using information to get better is what we're all about here. on the Better Every Shift podcast. So you fit right in, and that's it. You're anointed as a member of the Misfit Nation here, like it or not. So you can be, you got your nerds and your misfits, man. Life should be good. And with that, I also want members of the Better Every Shift Nation here, as I like to call you misfits, please email us at bettereveryshift@firerescue1.com. Thanks again for joining us. Please share this episode. Go back and review the episode we did with Sarah along with other ones. And most importantly, make sure you get out there and learn something, do something, and share something to make you and those around you better every shift. Thanks for listening, everybody.